big ball. Going for the big shot, and he hits it.
That's batted into the air, intercepted, and the Bears are going to win it.
Another training camp practice in the books for the Bears. Week 2 of the preseason is officially here. There's a ton of stuff to break down because the Bears starters are going to play on Sunday night against Buffalo in what is a Sunday night preseason football game. It is going to be nationally televised. Welcome into the Halas Beat, brought to you by the Bear Report. Usayd, Koshul, Steve, Letizia here. Be sure to check us out on Twitter at CFC Bears, at Usayd Koshul, and then at Halas Beat. This is episode 50, so halfway to 100 here. I know that, this pod's been through a lot of changes. The show's been through a lot of changes over the last couple months, but if you're joining us on YouTube, we sincerely thank you guys for the support. If you are listening to the audio version of this thing, well then thank you for the support as well. Steve, there's, I guess, a lot to discuss here, because everyone's going to be focused on week 2 of the preseason. Everyone wants to kind of talk about the players that have to show up during week 2 of the preseason. To me, with some of these starters playing, everyone's going to be watching those starters, but there's a ton of other players, I think, that are going to need to show out this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And it starts with Caleb Williams. I mean, he's getting his first preseason action in a Ben Johnson offense. We haven't seen that yet. So, I mean, I'm not going to talk too much about Caleb Williams because that's just kind of a given. But it definitely starts with him. Other guys, though, I think need to have big preseason games this week. I want to see the defensive line stand out a little bit. Javon Dexter, in particular, is the guy I have circled to watch. I thought he's really flashed his first couple of years in the league. He's apparently having a really good training camp by all accounts, all the people that are there. So I want to see him come out in this preseason game against most likely the Bills starting offensive line and make some plays or at least be disruptive. Because I think we've talked a lot about the edge pressure for the Bears. We talked about Montez Sweat and Dayo Odeyingbo, who are two guys who I think need to have big games as well. Austin Booker, Dominic Robinson, we talked about them last week. We haven't really talked too much about the interior, but I think Javon Dexter really stepping up and being the player that I think he can be just opens up this defense so much more because, interior pressure in my mind is, more disruptive than edge pressure because edge pressure quarterback can just kind of step up in the pocket. But if you get pressure right up the middle, there's not a whole lot that the quarterback can do to kind of evade that. So I really want to see Javon Dexter step up. He's a guy I've circled on the defense. On the offensive side of the ball, guy I'm really going to be watching is Jonah Jackson at right guard. He was technically a Pro Bowler injury replacement when he was with Ben Johnson back in 2021. That was a long time ago. The Rams basically gave up on him for nothing. I want to see how he looks in this first preseason game, this first action. And I'm hoping he looks good. And because, if we've talked a lot about the left tackle position, the next position that we have question marks on the offensive line, I think, is right guard. Darnell Wright has right tackle locked up. Drew Dahlman and Joe Tooney are going to do what they're vets. They're going to do what they do. But Jonah Jackson, I still have questions about. Those questions aren't going to be answered in one preseason game, whether he looks good or he looks bad. That doesn't, define anything. But I think him looking good on this offensive line is going to go a long way to helping the offense as a whole. We talked about it last week. The run blocking in the week 1 with the backup offensive lineman was not very good across the board. I think expect that to change with the starters in, and I expect Jonah Jackson to be a big part of that as well.
You talk about Jonah Jackson, and I'm so glad you brought that name up because, yes, the Bears traded a 6th-round pick for Jonah Jackson, but the big thing that so many people are split on is that you don't really know, and I understand the familiarity with Ben Johnson from their days together in Detroit, but let's call it how it is that was a very different Ben Johnson. That was also a very different Jonah Jackson because Ben Johnson at that point was an assistant coach. He was not necessarily a offensive coordinator. That obviously got that promotion in 2022. And so, yes, they're familiar with each other, but I do want to make that big distinction. Now, the second thing to keep in mind here is that when it comes to Jonah Jackson, the reason he's on my watch list is because everyone sits there and gives Jonah Jackson a hell of a lot of criticism, and he has this bad reputation for being the type of player that isn't very good, because he didn't fit with what Sean McVay and the Rams were going to do, but he was also injured. I like to sort of put a little bit of a positive spin on this. And I think that first off, the Jonah Jackson in Los Angeles situation just goes to show the reason they got rid of him for pennies and he's now with the Bears is because not every player that a team signs and acquires is going to fit perfectly into whatever type of scheme a team is running. Okay. The second thing is that health matters above all else. The third thing is that just because you have an offensive wizard as a head coach, it doesn't necessarily mean that any player you acquire is suddenly a great fit. And so with Jonah Jackson, we're still figuring out what specifically he's going to be. But the reality of it is this, is that people also have to understand the bar at right guard has been so low since Kyle Long left town that Bears fans are, and the media and this franchise is not asking for a guy that can come in and play at the level of a Kyle Long, who was one of the most underrated offensive linemen of his time in the league. They're simply asking for a consistent and stable presence and someone that is going to go ahead and really just come in and be that anchor needed on the right side of the offensive line next to Darnell Wright, because everyone thought he was supposed to be Nate Davis. Turns out it's not Nate Davis. Then the Bears are in a situation where it's like, all right, well, you try to light a fire under Nate Davis by trading for Ryan Bates, and Ryan Bates was on Ryan Poles' radar for 2 years. That doesn't work out. That lands you on Jonah Jackson. So as crazy as it sounds, right guard is one of the few positions that Ryan Poles has really been terrible at evaluating, and you're hoping that Jackson can kind of be that presence. Otherwise, it might be time to start looking at interior offensive linemen in next year's draft.
Yeah, that's a really good point about just kind of like the expectations, because he was signed last year. Jonah Jackson signed a contract with the Rams last year, obviously a pretty big one. We expected him to be kind of a big piece for them. It didn't end up happening because injuries and effectiveness, whatever it was. But now, coming to the Bears, you traded for a 6th-round pick for him. You do give him an extension, which I was thrilled about, but you only gave up a 6th-round pick to get him. He's not your big acquisition on the offensive line this year. You have Joe Thuney, you have Drew Dahlman. Darnell Wright's entrenched on the right side. You don't need him to come in. You don't need Jonah Jackson to come in and be your best offensive lineman. He's going to be sandwiched in between two solid players. You just need him to be serviceable. Like you said, Nate Davis was, the Nate Davis experience was a disaster. You got to be a lot better than that. But even if he just comes in and just plays at an average level, I think the Bears are going to be in really good shape. They just need some stability. The stability more than anything on the offensive line is what teams would prefer. I mean, obviously you want the game changers, Penei Sewell's, Lane Johnson's, guys like that, but Trent Williams, guys like that. But it's nice to just have some familiarity on the offensive line and stability on the offensive line. I think Jonah Jackson could bring that, even if I don't think his ceiling is super high. But they don't need him to be the best right guard in football. They just need him to be. They just need him to be a serviceable player. And as long as we're talking about the offensive line and guys who we want to see show up during week 2, I think it's notable that I talked about Theo Benedict on Tuesday's show, how I thought he was their best offensive lineman. He's getting a lot of runs with the ones in practice today. He was splitting time with Braxton Jones with the ones at left tackle. I don't think he's going to end up winning the job, but I'm really, really curious to see kind of how they come out in week 2 with the rotation on at left tackle. Is Braxton Jones going to get the start again? Is Theo Benedict going to get the start again? Looks like Ozzie Trapillo's kind of, just getting second team reps now. So I don't know if he's still in the mix or not, but that's going to be really interesting. I think one of those guys needs to have a big game to kind of separate themselves from the group here.
Yeah, I mean, and Theo Benedict, by the way, is a sort of an interesting thing to monitor because, like I mentioned on the last show, first off, what this shows me is that Kirana Magaji is basically out of this race, okay, for who starts at left tackle. The Bears are solely focusing on him being on the right side of the line now, either at right guard or right tackle. And who knows, maybe the Bears' backup plan is to have Kirana Magaji eventually play that right guard position if Jonah Jackson does end up getting hurt. But you talk about, him needing to step up and just a conversation with some of the first team offensive line in general. I do really think that, the 2 left tackles for me are Ozzie Trapilo, Braxton Jones going into this game. I think that this game is going to tell us a lot about which player is truly ahead in the race. So right now they're sort of neck and neck this week, with Buffalo likely playing their starters as well. Plus the joint practice on Friday, there is a legitimate chance that we see one of these two guys start to emerge and really separate themselves from the entire competition. But I think it's worth throwing this wild card out there. So players who have to show up during week 2 of the preseason. I do think that, when you're talking about a roster of 90-something guys, right around 90 guys, I mean, there's a ton of players that have to show up this week, but I'm genuinely curious to see whether or not we're going to get a repeat performance from Noah Sewell and Ruben Hippolyte. And I mentioned those two guys because did they look good last week? Yes. Do they need to go ahead and do they need to put together another strong showing? Yes. Out of all the positions on defense right now, everything is set for the most part. That linebacker 3 spot is a bit of a question mark, but those two, Noah Sewell and Ruben Hippolyte, have to go ahead and prove that maybe the Bears can be in a damn good situation this year if they have 2 really good linebacker 3s rather than us making it seem like, well, it has to be a Noah Sewell, Tremaine Edmonds, and TJ Edwards. Like, maybe it's a situation to where it is just both of those guys really going ahead and tearing up things on defense.
Yeah, that third linebacker spot's really the only spot up for grabs on the defense for the most part. Assuming Jalen Johnson's going to come back healthy week 1. Noah Sewell and Ruben Hippolyte, those guys definitely need to be watching for them. Sewell, both the guys played really well against the run. I want to see them a little bit better in coverage, a little bit, more dialed in, maybe in zone coverage. I thought they were, not terrible there by any means, in week 1, but I think that if there is an area where they can improve, that's the one. That's one of the areas. But that being said, your third linebacker is mostly playing on just base downs, run downs anyway. So whoever wins that job is probably going to be the guy who's more physical, a little bit better against the run, to make those plays in the run game. But yeah, those two guys definitely keep an eye on them. And then anyone else, the linebacker position. There's a whole bunch of guys, Carl Jones, Powell Eccles, Swayze Bozeman, I thought played well last week. If any of those guys step up, it's always nice to have the bottom of your roster have those good linebackers because those are the guys that play on special teams. And linebackers are usually kind of your special teams aces. So it's nice to have those guys at the back end as well.
Speaking of guys playing and guys stepping up, the starters do get to go ahead and play this week. I look at this whole thing and I will admit is that this coaching staff is a little bit weird to me. And the reason being is because they're going to sit there and they're going to act all, super tough and aggressive. But then every time they get asked about, well, how many series are the starters going to play? It's always, well, we'll kind of see how things play out. We really haven't decided on it yet, which just tells me that, number one, this is a decision coming down to the 11th hour. Number two, when it does come to playtime in the preseason, Caleb Williams is going to have an opportunity to make plays. But more so, this is a staff that is very conservative, I want to say, with how many series these guys get to play. Because I only see them playing 1 or 2 series max.
Yeah, I mean, is the question how many starters will they play, or how many series will they play, or how many series I think they should play? Because those are two definitely completely different answers. If we're saying what I think they will, I agree. I think they're probably going to play, I would say 2 series, maybe 3. If they have like 2 3 and outs, they might go out for a third, something like that. What I would play them as, I would almost, maybe not a full half, but maybe into the second quarter, I would play them a little bit because I think they really, they just need reps. Caleb Williams needs reps. This offensive line needs reps. I know you got some veterans on there, but offensive line is a position where you really need to gel together. And the only way to do that is to play the position. I know we still have question marks on who the left tackle is, but those guys need to play together to kind of gel, as I mentioned. So I think they need reps. I think the running backs need reps. The running backs need to get hit a little bit. I would play them into the second quarter if it were up to me. But I think, yeah, they end up playing probably 2, maybe 3 series. But I agree with you with kind of what it seems like they're heading in the direction of not playing them too much. But man, they just need reps. The defense needs reps too. All these guys are learning Dennis Allen's system. The guys on the back end also, your DBs, they also need to kind of gel together, play off of each other a little bit. So it's nice to have all those guys getting the live reps. And I know, especially since they're doing the joint practices with the Bills, they probably won't play a whole lot because those are, intense practices. You can do a little bit more in those joint practices as well because those are not filmed and sent to other teams like the preseason games are. So those practices are a little bit more tense. There is truth to that, but I do think it's still, you can simulate a game experience as much as you want. It's never going to be the same as an actual game. And even though it is preseason, it is an actual game. Guys are hitting. The quarterback can be hit. I think that's important distinction. So I would play him kind of into the second quarter, but we'll see.
So you're saying end of second quarter is basically you want the starters to play the whole first half, which is 30 minutes.
Maybe not, no, I said into the second, not necessarily the whole first half. I would probably play the whole first half, but I would like to see him at least play into the second quarter because I think part of the reason I want to see them play more is you go out for a series, you get a couple first downs or whatever. It's still preseason, but the defense is going to make adjustments, and I want to see how they react to adjustments that are being made, kind of mid-game. So I think it's important to get multiple series to see, just to kind of see how you react to things changing around you. So I would play them a lot more than they're actually going to play, but it is what it is.
You're right. It indeed is what it is. If I am in Ben Johnson's chair right now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say have them play, at least 1 to 2 series in order to go ahead and, put this team in a situation to where they are effectively getting the live reps that they need. The other big thing to really keep in mind here is that when we talk about where this team is at right now, there's a lot of, gelling that has to still be done. It's a very close, very tight-knit group from everything we see, hear, and read. But then the reality of it, I think, is this as well, is that how do you get this, for this offense to fully come together, you got to get all 11 guys on the same page. Practice against the Bears defense at this point, when it's Bears offense versus Bears defense, is at the point right now where 3 to 4 weeks into camp, it's kind of stale. You need to go ahead. You need to have something that's going to ignite this offense entirely. And I do think that getting a chance to evaluate this offense against another opponent, another team, is going to go ahead and is going to go a long way toward ensuring that once week 1 rolls around, this team is ready to go.
Yeah, and we look at it this way. I mean, back when there was 4 preseason games, week 3 was really the week that everyone played their starters for a longer period of time. That's kind of this week now, because with only 3 preseason games, this is week 2 of the preseason. This is the week where you would, if you are going to play your starters of the preseason, this is the week where you'd play them multiple snaps or multiple series. If they don't, let's say they do play 2 series on Sunday against the Bills, I can't imagine they're going to play many more than that in week 3 against the Chiefs. That's the last preseason game. That's one where you're really trying to get a feel for the bottom of your roster. You're getting closer to the season. You don't want any guys getting injured. So if they only play 2 series this game, they might only play 1 series in week 3, and then you're looking at 1 or 2, and then you're looking for, in the entire preseason, Caleb Williams played threw the ball 10 times, maybe. Like that's low to me. To me, I think this is the week to play them and play them for an extended period of time. And then next week you can do the 1-2 series, just get a feel for the game, flow, and then get them out as soon as possible. But I think this is the week, if you're going to play them, this is the week to do it for multiple series.
Talk about guys playing an extended amount of time. Part of that is also carving out a role on the team that allows you to constantly see the field and really get an opportunity to get more reps than other guys in the room. So we kind of look at this whole thing here, and it is very interesting because the spotlight in the receiver room, I should mention, is on Luther Burden right now. It is on DJ Moore. It's going to be on Rome Odunze for the foreseeable future. But then the other part of this whole thing that I don't think people realize is that the Bears are looking for the possibility of a fourth wide receiver. Some people think it should be Tyler Scott. Haven't really heard much of anything from him. Some people think that it could possibly be in Oladame Zacchaeus. I think that it's going to be Oladame Zacchaeus as that wide receiver 3 or 4. And the reason being is because he's put together some really strong but under the radar, underrated performances as of late.
Zacchaeus has been a guy I've liked for a long time. I was really excited when they signed him. He's not a wide receiver 1, he's not a wide receiver 2, but I think he's a really solid wide receiver 3. We know Ben Johnson's mantra, no block, no rock. Zacchaeus isn't the biggest guy, but he's going to give effort in the run game. So he's going to see the field. I think he's going to be a big part of this offense. We saw him on the Commanders last year. He probably had his best season, over 500 yards, 3 touchdowns. Now that might not sound like a lot, but when you're the third, fourth target, like that's a pretty good season. A guy who's really reliable, who's is going to be where he needs to be on every play. It sounds like him and Caleb Williams have some chemistry together, because every time I'm on Twitter, scrolling Twitter during practices, it's always Williams to Zacchaeus for a big gain, or 2 throws to Zacchaeus. So it sounds like they have a good connection, and I want to see that going. Obviously, Luther Burden's going to rotate in. Colson, they're going to run a lot of 2 tight end sets with Colson Loveland and Cole Kmet. But I think you got to find a way to get Zacchaeus on the field just because of all the things that he can bring to the table. Again, we're not talking about a game changer here, but it's a guy who's going to be steady, going to give you good production. Maybe, if especially early on in the season, as Luther Burden and also Colson Loveland, kind of get a feel for the NFL speed, get into the playbook a little bit more. Those guys, Zacchaeus gives those guys a little bit of a cushion to kind of be rookies a little bit early on in the year before kind of taking over that role. But I expect Zacchaeus to have a big role, especially early on. And I'm really excited for what he can bring. He's been on 3 different teams, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Washington, and he's produced on all 3 of those teams in a limited role. But he's just that perfect wide receiver 3-4 that, I think the Bears can really rely on.
And speaking of relying on him, Zacchaeus' best element to me and best trait to me is obviously going to be his speed. I really love what he brings to the table there. It is also incredibly important to kind of keep in mind that, when we're talking about a player like him that is bringing a ton of speed to the table, that is essentially what you want. Because if you get a speedy vertical threat that is stretching the defense vertically, stretching this field horizontally as well, what you are basically doing then is you're using Zacchaeus as the decoy guy, and then you're effectively opening up a lot of those passing routes underneath and those 2-man concepts underneath that are going to allow guys like Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, as well as Luther Burden to really come together and thrive. And so it is one of those big situations to where, while people sort of sit there and people sort of look at Oladame Zacchaeus, and originally it's interesting because when they signed him, I was just like, oh well, the Bears signed another veteran wide receiver because they want to go ahead, they want to do what we know they're going to do, which is create depth. But then you go ahead and you start to kind of look at everything here, and it's not just about, I think, creating the depth. It is genuinely about making sure that you're bringing in those veterans that are low cost, high reward type of guys, right? So you're low risk, high reward types of guys, and that's the type of, safe but risky signing that a team like this, which is trying to take the next step, needs to make.
It's an absolutely perfect signing because, free agencies before the draft, the Bears didn't know that Luther Burden was going to be available. They didn't know, how the draft's going to shake out at wide receiver. So you sign Zacchaeus, you have him. If he's your, unquestioned 3rd wide receiver, you're perfectly okay with that. But in the draft, if someone like Luther Burden falls to you, he doesn't prevent you from drafting that stud. So Ryan Poles, I'll give him credit there. I love how the way he handled the wide receiver room this offseason. You could throw Devin Duvernay in there too. He's not as good as Zacchaeus, but he's another guy who's a vet. He's a solid player. He gives you flexibility in that draft. So I really like both those signings. But with Zacchaeus, I think he has a chance to be a decent part of this offense. He might only have 200, 250 yards, maybe 300 yards as a receiver. But I think he's going to get you those tough yards. He's going to be reliable. He's going to catch the ball when it's thrown to him. He's going to be in the right spot. Obviously, Odunze and Moore are going to be a big, the main focus, and Loveland and Kmet too. But Zaccheaus can definitely carve out a role. And I think part of him kind of having a good training camp is part of the reason you see DJ Moore lined up in the backfield from time to time. I mean, just imagine having, Colson Loveland at tight end, Rome Odunze on the outside, Zaccheaus and Burden, at wide receiver as well, and then DJ Moore lined up in the backfield. That's really, really difficult to cover. That's a lot of weapons, a lot of speed out on the field, and it gives the offense a whole new dynamic that is going to be really tough to cover.
Is there a part of you that thinks that the reason we're going to see DJ Moore in the backfield so much is because the Bears have a legitimate weapon in Zaccheaus as well, even though he is technically one of the older wide receivers on the roster?
I think that's part of it. I mean, it has to be. He is one of the older, but he's 28. He's not super old, but yeah, he is on the older side. But yeah, I think that's part of it. You find ways to get your best players on the field, no matter the NFL has always been moving towards positionless football on the defensive side of the ball, on the offensive side of the ball too. So it's just about getting your playmakers out on the field, and if that means putting DJ Moore in at running back, then more power to you. I mean, Zaccheaus is part of that. I think Luther Burden's probably a bigger part of that, and probably Colson Loveland too. But I do think Zaccheaus is in that conversation of why you try to move guys around a little bit. Also, wouldn't surprise me if you see Zaccheaus out of the backfield as well. I think he has that skill set to kind of work underneath to create mismatches as well.
He is certainly going to go ahead and be a interesting player to monitor, because if you can get production out of 4 really good wide receivers combined with 2 solid tight ends, and then you can all of a sudden get the running game figured out, then you can get the quarterback playing on time and just getting him to slow down just a bit. Well, then there is going to be a pretty decent formula for success. Obviously, the biggest ingredient is going to be making sure that the Bears are all good in the trenches. So we're going to continue monitoring all of that. Before we get out of here, guys, make sure that you are following us on Twitter at Usayd Koshul, at CFC Bears, and at Halas B. If you're watching us on YouTube, guys, make sure to go ahead, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate you guys tuning in. If you are listening to us on audio, give us a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcast. How this thing's going to work starting next week is we're going to move to recording once a week on Thursday nights so that you guys go ahead and get a Friday morning show. The reason we wanted to do that is because the closer we get to the season, one episode is going to be just fine on a Thursday, because that's usually when we're going to hear the Bears coordinators speak. So it'll be nice to hear from Declan Doyle, Richard Hightower, as well as Dennis Allen, some players as well. Ben Johnson will obviously have 2 to 3 pressers, and then it's going to kind of allow us to preview whatever game and opponent they are playing that week, plus monitor the top storylines. But other than that, ladies and gentlemen, you guys will hear from us next week. So bear down, have a great rest of your day, have a great rest of your weekend.